6 months had passed since the big showdown at the sheriff's office, and Oak Ridge was feeling like a whole new vibe. Mr. Sterling was locked up, awaiting trial, and his shady empire had crumbled faster than a cheap cookie. Eleanor's new house was finally finished, and let me tell you, it was a total flex. It wasn't a giant mansion, but it was modern, cozy, and aesthetic as heck. Built right on the same spot where the old one had burned down. "Check it out, Teddy. We've got a porch that actually slays," Eleanor laughed, watching the sunset from her new rocking chair. Teddy was lounging on his own custom-made velvet throne, looking like the goat he truly was. The whole town had chipped in for the Teddy Hero Park across the street, which featured a giant bronze statue of a dog, with the caption, "The Stray Who Saved the Day." It was pure wholesomeness. But don't think for a second that things had gone boring. One afternoon, while Eleanor was unpacking the last of the boxes from the bank vault, the ice and the cash Silas had left behind, she noticed Teddy acting sus again. He wasn't interested in his gourmet treats or his squeaky toys. Instead, he was sitting by the new fireplace, staring at a specific stone in the chimney. "Oh no, Teddy, don't tell me we're back on the grind already," Eleanor sighed, her heart doing a little jitter. Teddy walked over to the fireplace and let out a bossy bark, then tapped his paw against a loose-looking stone. This wasn't the old house, so there shouldn't have been any secrets here. But the architect Eleanor hired was the son of one of Silas's old army buddies, a guy who was low-key into puzzles. Eleanor reached out and gave the stone a little push. She gave it a harder shove, and suddenly a small hidden drawer clicked open. Inside wasn't money or diamonds. It was a single, old-fashioned VHS tape and a map of the Oak Ridge Mountains that looked like it had been through a war zone. "A VHS tape? That's so vintage," Eleanor muttered, looking for her old player. She hooked up the old tech and hit play. The screen flickered with static before Silas's face appeared, looking much younger and a bit shook. "Eleanor, if you're seeing this, it means you found the dog and the dog found the house," Silas's voice crackled through the speakers. "Teddy isn't just a stray I found. He's the grandson of a dog I trained in the Special Forces. His lineage is built different. They're bred to find what's hidden." Eleanor's jaw hit the floor. Teddy wasn't just a lucky find, he was a legacy. Silas continued, "There's an old gold vein under the ridge that the government ghosted back in the 40s. Sterling's family stole the maps, but I took the original. The map in this drawer leads to the entrance. It belongs to the town, Eleanor. Don't let the snakes get it." The video glitched and cut to black. Eleanor sat there, feeling absolutely shook. She looked at the map, then at Teddy. "So, the mall was just a front for a gold mine?" Eleanor whispered. "This is getting wilder by the second." Just then she heard a car pull into her driveway, a loud, obnoxious engine that sounded like trouble. She looked out the window and saw a group of men in tactical gear stepping out of a blacked-out van. They weren't Sterling's guys. These guys looked professional, like they were from some shady private security firm. "Looks like the final boss has a second phase, Teddy," Eleanor said, grabbing her coat and the map. "They're not here for the house. They're here for the gold." Teddy let out a ferocious growl, his eyes glowing with that hero energy. "Time to vibe check these goons," Eleanor muttered, slipping out the back door into the shadows of the forest. The destiny wasn't over yet. It was just getting upgraded to a whole new level. The night air was chilly as Eleanor and Teddy slipped through the dense pine trees behind her new home. Behind them, she could hear the heavy boots of the tactical goons crunching through the brush, their flashlights cutting through the dark like lightsabers. These guys weren't amateurs like Sterling's crew. They were sweaty tryhards who clearly knew how to track. "They're thirsty for that map, Teddy, but we're the ones with the home court advantage," Eleanor whispered, her breath hitching in the cold. Teddy was in full stealth mode. He wasn't barking or making a sound. He was just a golden shadow moving through the ferns, occasionally stopping to sniff the air and scout the safest path. Eleanor followed him, clutching the vintage map and a heavy-duty flashlight she'd grabbed at the last second. According to Silas's map, the entrance to the ghost mine was hidden behind a waterfall near the Eagle's Peak, a place the locals thought was cursed and stayed away from. It was a trek that would be tough for a young hiker, let alone an 80-year-old lady, but Eleanor felt like she had infinite stamina tonight. "We're almost at the ridge, buddy," she panted, looking back. The goons were still on their tail, but they were struggling with the steep incline. Suddenly, the sound of rushing water filled the air. They reached the waterfall, a massive curtain of white foam crashing into a rocky pool. Teddy didn't hesitate. He walked right along a slippery ledge behind the water. "You gotta be kidding me, Teddy. I'm gonna get soaked." Eleanor groaned, but she followed him anyway. Behind the falls was a dark, damp cavern that looked like it hadn't been touched since the 40s. Eleanor clicked on her light, and the cave walls started glistening. It wasn't just wet rock. There were actual veins of gold running through the stone like glitter on a craft project. "Silas, you weren't joking. This place is a literal gold mine," she breathed, her jaw hitting the floor again. But the vibe check came fast. A voice echoed from the entrance of the cave, cold and robotic. "Drop the map, Eleanor. It's over. You're out of moves," the lead goon said, stepping through the waterfall with his gear looking shiny and expensive. He had a laser sight pointed right at the map in her hand. Eleanor stood her ground, her heart thumping. "You think you can just invade our town and steal what belongs to us? You're tripping if you think I'm handing this over." The goons smirked. "We don't care about the town. We care about the bag, and you're just a boomer standing in the way of a billion-dollar payday." He stepped closer, but Teddy moved in front of Eleanor, letting out a growl that sounded like pure thunder. The cave amplified the sound, making it bone-chilling. Just as the goon reached for the folder, Teddy didn't attack the man. He jumped up and pulled a rusty lever on the wall that Eleanor hadn't even noticed. Rumble, crack. A massive iron gate, hidden in the ceiling, crashed down between Eleanor and the goon, sealing the entrance. The goon was clapped on the other side, shouting and banging against the bars, but he was stuck. "Teddy, you're a genius," Eleanor cheered, hugging the dog. But now they were trapped inside the mine, with only one way to go: deeper into the mountain. Eleanor looked at the map again and saw a second exit labeled the Founder's Escape. "Looks like we're going on an underground adventure, buddy," she said, her voice echoing in the tunnels. "But we gotta be careful. Who knows what other traps Silas left behind to keep the snakes out." As they walked deeper, Teddy stopped and pointed his nose toward a wooden crate in the corner. On top of it was an old, dusty radio transmitter that was still blinking with a faint red light. "Someone's already infiltrated the mine, Teddy," Eleanor whispered, her blood running cold. "And it's not just the goons behind us. There's a traitor in the town who's been pinging our location the whole time." The cave was pitch black, except for the narrow beam of Eleanor's flashlight, which was starting to flicker, a total low-battery nightmare. Teddy was standing as still as a statue, his ears swiveling toward the blinking radio transmitter. The pings were steady, rhythmic, and mad creepy in the silence of the mine. "If someone's tracking us from the inside, Teddy, we're sitting ducks in this tunnel," Eleanor whispered, her voice trembling just a bit. She leaned in closer to the transmitter and noticed a small laminated ID card tucked under the crate. She picked it up, and when the light hit the name, she felt like she'd been hit by a freight train. It wasn't Mr. Sterling's name. It wasn't a goon's name. It was the name of the local billionaire who had offered to build the Teddy Hero Park, Mr. Henderson. Henderson? No way. He seemed so chill and wholesome, Eleanor gasped, her brain doing mental gymnastics. "He wasn't helping us because he's a nice guy. He was just scouting the location so he could steal the gold for himself. He's the ultimate snake." Teddy let out a vicious huff, clearly agreeing that Henderson was cancelled. Suddenly, a voice crackled through the radio on the crate. "Team Alpha, status update. Have you secured the old lady yet? We're losing light, and I want that gold manifested by midnight. Don't let that mutt get in the way." It was Henderson. His mask was officially off. "We gotta move, Teddy. If he's on the other side of this mountain, he's probably waiting at the Founder's Escape," Eleanor said, grabbing the map. They began speed-walking through the twisting tunnels. The mine was a labyrinth. Old wooden supports were rotting away, and the floor was dodgy with deep cracks. Teddy was leading the charge, jumping over gaps and sniffing out the safest path with elite precision. They reached a massive underground chamber that looked like a secret base from an old spy movie. In the center was a huge iron safe, bolted into the bedrock. This was the main stash Silas had mentioned in the VHS tape. But instead of a combination lock, there was a small, dog-sized pressure plate on the floor, and a keyhole for the tarnished key. Eleanor was still clutching.
It's a two-man job, Teddy. You gotta stand on the plate while I turn the key, Eleanor realized. Teddy stepped onto the plate with main character energy, and Eleanor jammed the key in. Clunk, whir, the safe door swung open, revealing not just more gold, but a mountain of evidence against every corrupt official in the state, including Henderson. Silas had been collecting receipts his whole life, waiting for a dog smart enough to find them. We got the ultimate tea, Teddy. This isn't just a payday, this is a nuke for Henderson's career, Eleanor cheered. But then the sound of a helicopter started thumping outside the cave's hidden exit. The final boss had arrived. Through the founder's escape door, a heavy stone slab, they could see Henderson stepping off a sleek black chopper, looking mad pressed. Eleanor, I know you're in there. Henderson's voice boomed through a megaphone. The park was just a marketing stunt. Give me the documents and the gold, and I'll let you and the dog walk away. Otherwise, we're sealing this mine for good. He wasn't capping. A group of his men started setting explosives around the cave's mouth. They were going to bury Eleanor and Teddy alive to keep the secret hidden. He's tweaking if he thinks we're just going to sit here and take it, Eleanor shouted, her eyes blazing. Teddy looked at Eleanor, then at a pile of old, dusty dynamite in the corner of the safe. He nudged a small handheld detonator toward her. You want me to fight fire with fire? Eleanor asked, a wild smile spreading across her face. All right, Henderson. You wanted a boom? Let's give you a spectacle. Teddy grabbed the heavy bag of evidence in his teeth, and Eleanor prepped the blast. They weren't just surviving anymore, they were going full offensive. The vibe inside the underground chamber was straight-up cinematic. The air was thick with the smell of old iron and danger, and the thumping of Henderson's helicopter outside felt like a countdown to disaster. Eleanor looked at the detonator in her hand, then at Teddy, who was standing firm, clutching the bag of shady documents in his teeth like a totaled beast. Henderson thinks we're finished, Teddy, but he doesn't know we're about to break the internet with his secrets, Eleanor whispered, her thumb hovering over the button. Outside, Henderson was bugging out, shouting through his megaphone for his goons to prime the charges. He wanted to delete the evidence, and Eleanor along with it. But Eleanor had noticed a low-key detail on the map Silas left behind. A secondary pressure valve that would cause a controlled collapse of the entrance, without bringing the whole mountain down. All right, buddy. On the count of 3 we send it, Eleanor yelled over the roar of the chopper. 3. Boom. The explosion didn't just shake the cave, it sent a massive cloud of dust and glittering gold dust flying out of the cave's mouth, blinding Henderson's men. In the confusion, Eleanor and Teddy dashed through the smoke like ninjas. Henderson's goons were clueless, coughing and stumbling around, while Teddy used his elite senses to weave through the chaos toward the helicopter. Hey, Henderson, your subscription to being a billionaire just expired, Eleanor screamed as she emerged from the smoke, looking absolutely iconic with soot on her face and a fire in her eyes. Henderson looked shook. He tried to scramble into the chopper, but Teddy was faster than a 5G connection. The dog lunged forward and grabbed Henderson's expensive leather briefcase, the one containing the remote access to his offshore accounts, and yeeted it right into the rocky pool below the waterfall. You stupid mutt, Henderson shrieked, looking totally clapped. But it was too late to save face. Teddy wasn't done flexing. He dropped the bag of Silas's evidence at the feet of a news drone that had been low-key hovering nearby, following the commotion from town. Everything, the gold, the bribes, Henderson's shady threats, was being live-streamed to the entire world in 4K resolution. "The whole world is watching you, Henderson," Eleanor laughed, leaning against a rock as the sheriff's sirens finally began to echo through the valley. "You tried to gatekeep the gold, but you just leaked your own downfall." Henderson's final boss energy evaporated instantly. He fell to his knees as the sheriff's tactical team swarmed the area. The betrayal was over, and the hero of the night wasn't a politician or a billionaire. It was a stray dog who was built different. But as the police were clearing the scene, Teddy didn't go for a victory lap. He stood by the edge of the mine entrance, looking back into the dark tunnels with a somber expression. He let out a haunting howl that echoed across the peaks. "What is it, Teddy? Is there more?" Eleanor asked, her heart skipping a beat. Teddy nudged her toward a small, hidden time capsule that had been dislodged by the explosion. Inside was a photo of Silas, a younger Eleanor, and a dog that looked exactly like Teddy. On the back it said, "The gold is for the town, but the bond is for eternity. The protector will always return when the destiny calls." Eleanor realized then that Teddy wasn't just a guardian of the gold. But, just as they were about to head home, a mysterious black car with government plates pulled up. A woman in a dark suit stepped out, looking extra serious. "Mrs. Eleanor, we're from the Department of Ancient Secrets," she said, her voice icy. "That mine you just opened, it's not just a gold mine. It's a portal to something we've been tracking for 80 years. And your dog, he's the only one who can close it." "Oh, you gotta be kidding me," Eleanor groaned. "We're really doing a sci-fi twist now?" Teddy let out a determined bark. The ultimate finale was about to begin, and it was going to be out of this world. The vibe outside the mine had shifted from an action movie to straight-up sci-fi. The air around the cave entrance began to hum with a weird purple energy that made Eleanor's hair stand on end. The woman from the Department of Ancient Secrets looked dead serious, her eyes fixed on Teddy as the dog stood his ground, looking like a warrior. "Listen, lady, we've already dealt with snakes, fires, and corrupt billionaires," Eleanor said, crossing her arms. "If you're capping about a portal, you better speak up now, because we're exhausted." "I wish I was tripping, Eleanor," the agent replied, her voice icy. "Silas wasn't just guarding gold. He was guarding a frequency. This mountain sits on a tectonic rift that shouldn't be open. When you use the key in the dog's pressure plate, you unlocked the seal. If it's not closed in the next 10 minutes, the whole town of Oak Ridge is history." Teddy let out a soul-shaking bark and looked deep into the purple glow. He didn't look scared. He looked ready to carry the whole team. He nudged Eleanor one last time, a tender moment that felt like a goodbye. "No way, Teddy. I'm not letting you go in there solo," Eleanor cried, clutching his collar. "We're a duo. We slay together." The agent shook her head. "Only the protector can enter. It's a DNA lock. Your husband Silas coded the final reset to his most loyal companion. It's the ultimate destiny." Teddy licked Eleanor's hand, gave a heroic wag of his tail, and yeeted himself into the glowing portal. The explosion of light was blinding, and for a second the whole mountain was dead quiet. Eleanor sat on the ground, feeling down bad, and totally shook. She'd saved the town, but she'd lost her GOAT. Suddenly the purple glow turned into a massive shockwave of pure gold light. The humming stopped. The rift snapped shut with a sound like a closing vault. The mountain felt solid again. Is it over?" Eleanor whispered, her eyes tearing up. The agent checked her high-tech watch. "The frequency is zeroed out. The town is safe. But the dog, he's gone into the reset." Eleanor walked to the cave entrance, feeling heartbroken. But then she heard a familiar, bossy little sneeze from the shadows. Out of the dust and debris walked Teddy, looking a bit scruffy, but otherwise totally fine. In his mouth he was carrying one last thing, a vintage locket that had belonged to Eleanor, something she thought she'd lost in the fire months ago. "Teddy, you legend," Eleanor screamed, picking him up and spinning him around. "You really are built different. You closed the tab on the apocalypse and still found my jewelry." 1 week later, Oak Ridge was thriving. With Henderson and Sterling behind bars, the town's economy was booming, thanks to the gold fund Silas had left for everyone. Eleanor's aesthetic new house was now a sanctuary for stray dogs, funded by the Teddy Hero Foundation. The Teddy Hero Park was officially open, and the bronze statue was now a local landmark, where people left treats and 5-star reviews. Eleanor and Teddy sat on their new porch, watching the sunset. The mystery was solved, the villains were cancelled, and their destiny was finally secured. "You know, Teddy," Eleanor said, scratching him behind the ears, "people used to call you a stray, but you turned out to be the main character of this whole world." Teddy let out a happy, victorious woof and drifted off to sleep. The legacy of the fire and the mine was over, but the legend of the dog who saved everything was just getting started. The end.